We talk about Pakistan being an import-oriented country. Pakistan's really not that high in terms of imports to GDP ratio. The problem really is that we don't export enough. But what we do is that we collect most of our taxes through import. So we have a lot of barriers. So the companies are better off selling to Pakistanis because we have such barriers to entry from foreign, for foreign goods, that companies make a lot of profits selling to Pakistanis. So that's another disincentive for exports.
And I remember that during your tenure, you tried to tax the real estate. You wanted to inject certain measures, but then there was a lot of pushback from various political factions as well.
Nobody likes to pay taxes. Okay, there are 2.5 million shops in Pakistan. Only 30,000 pay income tax. Surely, maybe 1.5 million should be paying some tax. And the roads that we build enables people to drive on them and go to the shops. That's from government's money. The street lights that we provide, which enables people to walk in after dusk and walk to the shops, that's also provided by government money. So it's part of the shopkeeper's responsibility or shop owner's responsibility to pay back as a good member of the society.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nauraiz Rana, and I'm an economist with the World Bank. I'll be hosting today's program on New Wave, in which we will be talking about some of the key woes that Pakistan's economy continues to face. And more importantly, what are the solutions to address those challenges? We will be talking about some of the next immediate steps and measures that the newly formed government should take in order to guide Pakistan out of the current turbulent environment that it happens to be in. And joining me for this discussion, I have a very special guest who needs absolutely no introduction. But I would still like to welcome and introduce Dr. Miftah Ismail, who has twice served as the Federal Minister of Finance. He's served as the chairperson of Pakistan's Board of Investment, started off his career working as an economist with the IMF in Washington, D.C., and has also been running and operating his family business, the Ismail Industries Limited, which is one of the country's leading food manufacturers. So Dr. Ismail does not only bring with him insights and knowledge about public governance and economic management, but also the perspectives and point of views of the private sector, which is a key stakeholder in the economy and in the country. And so before I end the introduction, I want to highlight that personally, I'm a huge fan. And I say that because of some of the very tough measures and steps that you took in 2022, which were not populist in nature, actually, because of which you even had to sacrifice your own political capital. But that was the need of the day in order to realize some sense of economic stability. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for joining me today for this discussion.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm certainly a pleasure to be here. And thank you for your kind words.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You deserve all the praise for that. So before I turn to you, I just wanted to briefly set the stage for today's discussion. It's been quite some decades since Pakistan really found some economic stability or was able to solidify its economic health. But the last few years have been especially turbulent and tumultuous. If we look at just the statistics in 2023, the inflation went up as high as 39%. Unemployment numbers are staggeringly high. The GDP growth contracted to 0.6%. The value of the currency is at one of its lowest. And it realized, I guess, the second highest decrease of up to 9.6% somewhere in 2023, after about 20 years. The last time it happened was in the late 90s. And in the center of it all is the debt crisis. Pakistan's current external debt is 128 billion. In 2018, when PTI government came into power, the external debt was 93 billion. And when PMLN before that came into power in 2013, the external debt was 61 billion. To summarize it all, over the course of the last 10 years, we've accumulated more than 100% in external debt. And if you throw internal debt into the mix, the equation becomes even more horrendous. We are currently standing at $234 billion in debt, which is projected to grow up to $409 billion by 2028 in 4 years. So for a country who's been negotiating with the IMF, and you've been at the forefront of all these negotiations and talks for as loans and bailout programs as little as $3 billion, it's unfathomable as to how will Pakistan address this problem. And I see it not as the problem, but rather as a symptom of structural deficiencies that exist in the system. We know Pakistan is an import-oriented economy. We don't have, or we've not been able to develop productive, capabilities that would enable us to export more. Because of that, we've been suffering with balance of payment crisis, trade deficits, whatnot. So my first question is that we know what's needed, what the governments needed to be, to in order to address the problem. But despite all that, whichever government comes into power, we only see a greater manifestation of the problem. There's no end towards its, the solution. Why is that?
Thank you. So, Nauraiz, I think, to be very honest with you, I think that people, the governments coming in, are not really sure of the fundamental issue or the fundamental problem with Pakistani fiscal issues, which is what you've been talking about. For instance, ever since the 2010 NFC award, it's the seventh NFC award, we gave about 57.5% total revenue earned by the federation to the provinces. Plus, we have to also give extra money for war on terror, some other monies to Islamabad, to Gilgit-Baltistan, to Azad Kashmir, which are not counted as part of the provincial giveaways. And so we end up giving 63% to the federation ends up giving 63% to the provinces. So the federation now is actually, almost always near, bankruptcy, and it has to borrow money even to pay its debt. This is the classic debt trap, right?
Yeah.
The provinces have a lot of money, and when they get money, and the more money they get, when the federation tries to, get out of a fiscal hole, and tries to raise taxes, again, 63% go to the provinces. The federation really isn't saving much, or isn't really getting all of it. And the provinces get more and more money, and it turns out that when you have more money, you think of ways to spend it. So the provinces are not taxing the areas which have been given to them, which have been devolved to them, like property taxes are not there in Pakistan in any meaningful way. Agriculture taxes are not there in Pakistan in any meaningful way. So the provinces don't tax property and agriculture, and property is where Pakistanis store their value. I mean, this is the biggest store of value, right? So property and agriculture are not taxed. And then what does the federation do? It taxes just manufacturing. And when it taxes manufacturing, that's why our manufacturing becomes uncompetitive, and we are not able to export so much. And then also our government tries to do cross subsidies to the poor. I like the fact that they're subsidizing the poor, but what they do is that, they make the power expensive for the manufacturing sector, gas expensive for the manufacturing sector, and that makes it even, less competitive. So those are issues. And then there is, we talk about Pakistan being an import-oriented country. Pakistan's really not that high in terms of imports to GDP ratio. The problem really is that we don't export enough. But what we do is that we collect most of our taxes through import. So we have a lot of barriers. So the companies are better off selling to Pakistanis because we have such barriers to entry from foreign, for foreign goods, that companies make a lot of profits selling to Pakistanis. So that's another disincentive for exports. But what's happened is that because you don't collect enough taxes, and what you collect, you give so much to the provinces, you will see that the deficit keeps growing as time goes on. And because of the old deficits and old debts that we have, the servicing of debt becomes more and more expensive. And so that's why you're projecting now 400 billion or so, debt in about a few years, because it's going to go faster and at an exponential rate.
So you actually hit the nail in the coffin, because of the fact that the incentives are so skewed in favor of non-productive sectors and non-productive, productive, tradable sectors, that there's very much less of an activity happening in the corporate sector, or those that tend to generate products that can be exported. Just looking at the taxation structures, if you're setting up a corporate entity, the tax is about 29%. But if you're investing in real estate, it's less than 5%. Sometimes it's as low as 0 to 1%. And I remember that during your tenure, you tried to tax the real estate. You wanted to inject certain measures, but then there was a lot of pushback from various political factions as well. And why is that? Shouldn't there be greater endorsement to such measures that you rightly highlighted?
So, look, I mean, nobody likes to pay taxes. Okay, there are 2.5 million shops in Pakistan. Only 30,000 pay income tax. surely, maybe 1.5 million should be paying some tax. Uh, and the roads that we build enables people to drive on them and go to the shops. That's from government's money. The street lights that we provide, which enables people to walk in after dark, after dusk, and walk to the shops. I mean, that's also provided by government money. So it's part of the shopkeeper's responsibility or shop owner's responsibility to pay back as a as a good member of the society. But when you try and tax them, they throw a fit, which is fine, which is what vested interests are. So what the government does is that it does the easy thing, and it will raise sales tax by 1%. And what's happened is that you tax really with regressive taxation. You tax the poor so much so that what poverty rate in Pakistan was 29% in 2018, and it has gone up to 39% today.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Which means that you have actually pushed another 20 million people
Into
below the
poverty.
poverty. That's huge, and that's
Yeah.
horrible. Okay. And you also have then 8 million babies being born every year. This year, 8 million, maybe next year, probably a little bit more. And you don't have the resources to put all these kids in school in 4 years' time. You don't have the resources to have hire teachers to teach all these kids. So half of these kids will never go in school. That's why we have 40% of our kids out of school right now. And this includes madrasa going kids. That's why 78% of Pakistani 10-year-olds, and this is a World Bank report, 78% of Pakistani 10-year-olds are not able to read age-appropriate sentences in any language. So, I mean, we are raising a generation and generation upon generation of semi-literate people, unskilled semi-literate people who are not able to compete in this world, in this, global village, and, with the rest of the world talking about AI and God knows what knows, Web3 and all that, and we don't have kids who can read. So, I mean, it's not just where Pakistan is right now. What is the direction in Pakistan is heading? Where are we going? Where are we going to end up in 5, 10 years? So Pakistan was used to being behind European countries and all that, but now we are behind Bangladesh. Now we are behind India. And these were countries that, we were ahead of. Sri Lanka, fine. Sri Lanka is very educated and it has much higher per capita GDP. But Bangladesh now has a higher GDP than us. Even India has a higher GDP than us. So, I mean, there are fundamental questions that we need to answer about ourselves and about our governance and about our nation. And I think that has.
That's absolutely very true. I mean, we can't look at economic development in isolation and separate from social development or even political stability, to say so. And to be honest, for the course of the program, I had some other questions in mind, but I really want to follow up with some of the things that you highlighted, especially related to the way the government has taxed corporations or even these basic private sector, micro, small, medium size industries in the past. But by saying that. Shops should not voluntarily, but shops members or shops owners should tax is, I think, maybe an idealistic intuition, because nowhere in the world have we seen that people voluntarily want to pay taxes. The framework is created in such a manner, whether that's a carrot or a stick approach, whether you give them access to finance or various other incentives, that they want to, be part of the tax bracket, formalize themselves, or there's such an enforcement approach that the penalties are such stringent that they cannot avoid being taxes. But in Pakistan, like you said, we tend to adopt a more regressive approach, heightening the sales tax, heightening indirect taxes, and then every now and then we see this amnesty scheme, which enables people to literally just get away with all that they've accumulated, paying 2-3% or maybe less, and no questions asked. And there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of empirical evidence which points that this is not a very conducive technique to go by. So I want to come back at the government. The government's job is not to create jobs. The government's job is not to create money or generate wealth. That's the private sector responsibility. And you who also represent the private sector are well aware of that. But the job of the government is to create that enabling environment. And but despite knowing the solutions, we've year on year, and regardless of which political party is in power, we see the same model being replicated every now and then. Whether that's Imran Khan, whether that was Mr. Nawaz Sharif, the same models of taxing people, of giving them, leveraging amnesty schemes, so on and so forth. So why can't we not come up with a more coherent plan and strategy that is more robust?
I wasn't saying that anybody would voluntarily pay taxes. I was saying actually that people don't like paying taxes, but that
Yeah,
there is a moral case to be made that we should tax everybody
yeah,
who is well off. Before putting more aggressive taxes in, before we start
okay.
taxing packaged milk, we should tax shopkeepers' income, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Uh, and because we do provide services to them. It's not cheap to run a country or cheap to run a government which provides an enabling environment, for growth. Uh, but I mean, we've not been able to do that. We need, and because of our fiscal hole, uh, the government tends to not only not provide an enabling environment, but it actually ends up providing a disenabling environment.
yeah.
So we need to do our basic work right to get to try and solve the problem.
Yeah. So, and speaking of fiscal deficit, so year on year, we've been operating on fiscal deficit. It's always between 8 to 10% of the country's GDP. And there are two parts to the equation. One is the fact that we've not been able to raise enough revenue through wealth generation or taxation. And the other is that inefficient allocation of resources, that is inefficient spending. And our state-owned enterprises are a huge example. So there was this World Bank report according to which Pakistan's SOEs are the worst in the region in South Asia and one of the worst in the world. And they've bled in just in 2023, I assume, they bled 458 billion rupees of taxpayers' money because of the fact that they're so inefficient and they're always operating on losses. And we know the solution there. Privatization should technically be the sound policy metric instrument that is used. But then we have this case of our power distributors, discos, and there's the bigger ones, the PIA, the steel mills, and it's been decades. And I remember that even when I was growing up, I was hearing about these stories that they would be privatized and privatization is happening. And now, I'm turning old, and still the same rhetoric, the same stories are being perpetuated, but without any tangible output.
Well, first of all, you're still a young man, so there's time enough for PIA to privatize. Secondly, let me start with this: that actually the deficits up until 2018 were 6%, then it went to 7.5%. Now they're about 8%. And the state enterprise losses are not all reflected in deficits. There is a company that we park some of the debts of those the companies in a company, so that's not really reflected in the deficit. If you include their losses, yes, then we will go to 8, 9, 10%. And the last 2 years, I've heard the losses in the last 2 years were 1,350 billion rupees. And I shudder to think which other country will have worse public sector enterprises than we do. But the problem is that when you privatize, or if you try to privatize, let's say you try to privatize Lahore Electric Supply Company, there are maybe 20, 25,000 employees who really don't want privatization, either because they don't want to lose jobs. Fine, you can just say that nobody will lose jobs. The government will absolutely make sure that they get paid. But there is also a lot of theft going on. There's no work going on, or ghost employees and all sorts of problems, right? So those 30,000 people don't really, and there's an uncertainty. So those 30,000 people do not want privatization, or at least 25 of these 30,000 people don't want privatization. So you have to take on that vested interest, and they will be, there will be street protests, and they would be, coming and raising slogans in front of politicians' houses, and all of that stuff they will do, and there will be media conferences and press conferences and all that, and there would be a ruckus, and they would make a big fuss. But on the other hand, once you're successfully able to privatize this, there are about 40 million people in the catchment area of Lahore Electric Supply Corporation. All of those guys will benefit. All of those households will benefit, because you will expect, line losses to go down. You will expect, transmission and distribution losses to go down. You will expect better bed collection. And if you do this across Pakistan, that's the only way right now to decrease power prices. Real reform is not passing on the increased cost of the government to produce electricity is try to reduce electricity production cost by privatizing it. And then we've also gotten into some really bad contracts with long-term contracts with the IPPs. There are ways to actually improve those things. And there eventually the government should try to create a wholesale market for electricity, and people should be able to buy electricity from whichever producer, like they've done in other countries. Same with the gas companies. PIA is an easy example. 8,000 people working for PIA, temporary employees, permanent employees, maybe a couple of thousand who really work hard. The temporary employees, they're not even well paid. Except for the cockpit crew, nobody's even well paid. And all of those people, I promise you, will have to work really hard, but will be actually better paid in a private sector airline. But if you had a private sector airline, we'll save 100 billion rupees that PIA loses, with which we can, make hospitals, schools, whatnot. But more importantly, it will actually bring in competition, real competition in the aviation sector. Another competing player would mean lesser price for tickets, but hopefully better service, things like that. Similarly, if you privatize the railway system, you can actually decrease the cost of freight from Karachi to Lahore. That is going to decrease the cost of doing business. So there are many upsides to this, but you need to be bold and you need to take these reforms.
Actually, excellent point. And you just mentioned that you need to be bold and take these reforms. And contrary to that, what we've seen is, and it's very unfortunate, that whichever party tends to be in opposition at the moment tends to hijack that narrative whenever the government sitting in power is trying to make the right move going towards privatization. And we've also seen similar manifestations of this narrative being hijacked whenever there's an IMF program. And there's this narrative that is perpetuated in Pakistan, this huge rhetoric that we are selling the country, we are going back to them, we're asking them for more. And I remember that 2022, when you came into power, when the PMLN came into power and you were at the helm of policy making, Pakistan was very much dwindling and intimately flirting with the idea of default. The things were very precarious, and some tough measures had to be taken, and which meant unfreezing the subsidy that was being accorded to the power sector, the energy sector, and oil prices. And the brunt, unfortunately, sadly, is felt by the common man. But these are those realistic, there's things which are realistic policy levels that there's no other way, you cannot maneuver them. That is what the call of the day is. And on that point, again, I remember, and I want to get your point of view on that. IMF is demonized. It's quite demonized quite a lot in Pakistan. And you've been at the center of it all. You've experienced that. Is that rightly demonized? Do we have other options, especially when we're looking at short-term solutions, when there's a liquidity crisis in Pakistan, whether you have less than 2 weeks of import cover available in your foreign reserves, in your foreign account? There's no other solution as to how I see it, other than us going to the IMF and asking for a bailout. But again, it's whoever the party is on the negotiating table is demonized, precisely, both the government and the IMF. How do you feel about that?
Look, strong, bold leadership means that the prime minister should stand behind his or her finance minister and the policy ministers and let them do the right thing and take the brunt. And not worry about weekly pulse of the public. Do the right thing. You can argue about this, but Margaret Thatcher did withstand a lot of pressure and coal miners' strike, and that's why she was then called the Iron Lady. And she served as British Prime Minister, I think, for 12 years or so. So sometimes you have to sort of take really tough calls. IMF is demonized, unfortunately, because politicians use this as politics, but it's not really even understanding what is the problem. I remember that Modi, the ratings agency,
the credit rating agency,
once downgraded Pakistan's rating when my successor, Mr. Ishaq Dar, was the finance minister. And he got really angry and said, I'm going to give a befitting replies to Moody's. Now, that's like, if you go to a doctor's office and the doctor says to you that, your blood pressure is very high. You need to quit smoking. You need to walk a little. And you say, well, you check your own blood pressure. You look at, you don't reply to a doctor who tells you your blood pressure is very high. You say, fine, okay, I'll start walking. So the IMF is something that tells you to stop smoking, to start walking, to eat more sensibly, cut out the fatty things and stuff like that. That's, I mean, and why is there no other options besides IMF? Well, it is the lender of last resort, which means that you've finished all other resorts. I mean,
Yeah.
you've gone through all other options. Nobody, nobody is lending to Pakistan unless we are within an IMF program. Your institution, the World Bank, doesn't lend to us. The Asian Development Bank doesn't lend to us. The Chinese Infrastructure Bank is not happy lending to us. No commercial bank in the world is lending to us, except some Chinese commercial banks. And so, I mean, there is no option but to get, if you have the low reserves as low as we do, there is no other option but to get a clean bill of health from the IMF, or at least get an IMF protection. This is what we need to do. This is where we stand. The fact that we've done so many IMF programs, so it is a shameful thing for us that we are letting our people down, because what you need to do is to get rid of the IMF from your list of lenders, and grow your economy so much that you don't need to worry about what IMF says, because you yourself do the right thing, and the country is on a sound footing. And I think IMF would like nothing more than Pakistan becoming a rich enough country or a stable enough country that we never need to go to the IMF except for Article 8 consultation.
Absolutely. And again, people forget that the entire framework of IMF is to help countries with short-term liquidity loan. They're not there to kind of rectify your economy and provide you with a framework that would help you grow and prosper. That is the responsibility of the government in itself. And you rightly gave the analogy of going to a doctor's office. And I want to take that same analogy forward. I mean, whenever someone's facing cardiac issues, you tend to go to a cardiologist. When you're facing issues with your eyesight, you go to an ophthalmologist. So on and so forth. And therefore, honestly, whenever I see you or someone of a similar profile come at the helm of affairs as the finance minister, personally, I'm really happy, because I know that person has spent years in the field, has a specialized degree, is a doctorate. I mean, you complete your PhD in public finance and economy, so it makes sense. But in Pakistan, we've seen, again, no matter which party comes in power, every now and then we tend to appoint someone who does not fit the bill. We are appointing people with MBAs who've successfully ran corporations, but they've never ran an economy, and we appoint them as ministers of finance. Similarly, someone who can be a very skillful, very apt chartered accountant, but they do not have the skill set. And economy is a very specialized field. You can't appoint a chemist in the position of a physicist. And that is the truth. That is the reality. But more often than not, this is what we see happening. Don't you feel that this is actually wrongful, that's your a disloyalty towards the country when we see such appointments in such key positions happening?
I would never call it disloyalty towards the country, but I would say bad choices. Yes, I mean, people have made, political parties have made bad choices. I think that, I mean, now the history also supports it, that, the decision to remove me at that critical point, when I had been able to revive the IMF program and we're about to, go for the 9th review, to remove me and to bring, my successor, and who, then did a song and dance for the next 9 months, but then, wasn't able to get IMF back on, track. And that included 4 months of the, more than 35% inflation, 4 consecutive months, which has never been the case in the history of Pakistan. And probably, push another 5 million people, below the poverty line. Okay. So, I mean, those have real world consequences for middle class and people, and working class people. So those are bad decisions, you could say, but disloyalty, I think, is not the right word.
I mean, disloyalty I was using as a metaphor, not to kind of highlight that someone's not loyal to the country. But I guess these are very crucial measures, and we need to give key consideration when you're appointing people in such prominent positions, where the entire fate of the country hinges on them. Like you said, 5 million people, additional 5 million people were pushed into poverty. I mean, it's easier to say, but if you kind of visualize the numbers and the impact it has on households and people living through these times, it is quite horrific. And so going forward, I want to zoom in a bit more on just 2024. This year, Pakistan is meant to return in excess of $20 billion in loan. The interest repayments account for about 56.7% of the country's GDP just for this year. How do you think the government would be able to address those?
What was the second point? The interest we would be paying would be what?
The interest repayments account for like 56.7% of the revenue of 2024. The amount of money that we're meant to return just in interest payments. And in such a scenario, it crowds out payment that can go towards other more development-oriented objectives such as education, healthcare, propping up human capital. But take 60% away, you're barely left with anything at all.
Actually, notice the reality is that once the government, the FBR revenue, and once the government pays the provinces, what it's left from the FBR revenue plus what it has in non-tax revenues, except for state bank profits and all that, that doesn't even cover the interest payment. So we have to borrow even to pay our interest back. And financially, it's a very precarious position, and we have to do basic changes. When it comes to foreign exchange, and you talk about 20 billion repayments, of that, a lot of money is automatically or almost automatically re-rolled because we have some deposits from friendly countries like China, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and these are in the bank, and they're one-year deposits that re-roll. So half of that just goes away like that. But we have to pay about 5, 6, 7 billion, 8 billion, something like this, 6, 7, 8 billion in interest, and 5 billion in interest plus a few billion in repayments. But for instance, the repayment we make to a World Bank, to the IMF, to the Asian Development Bank, they're fine because we also have new ongoing projects with them. So, that essentially there is no payout really. I mean, net we are, we get an injection from IMF, World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank. But there are other, like the loans for power plants, the Chinese power plants, or CPEC and all that. So that's a drain on resources. But even China is very kind and, then makes loans to us to enable us to pay that.
I mean, exactly, it hinges on debt rollover. I mean, that's how we've been kind of navigating through all this debt crisis in itself. And it's not.
If you had 40, 50, 60 billion dollars of reserves, those debt rollover become easy. And then, then you don't have to run from pillar to post. Then banks also see that there is liquidity. The problem is that we have, $10 billion of reserves. So, even a $2 billion or $1 billion loan re-roll becomes a big issue.
Yeah. So, and before we wrap up, I said like a couple of last questions. So we've talked about the key long-term solutions. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in our population, make them productive enough that they can contribute towards the economy's well-being and prosperity. We need to improve our fiscal deficit. We need to tax more. We need to enhance our productive capabilities, get the incentives right into productive sectors and away from redundant, such as real estate. But in the short term, especially in light of the manner in which the current elections happened. And, like I come back to the point that there's some key hard, tough decisions that need to be made. And nothing structurally has changed over the course of the last 2 years. We are still as much in a precarious situation as we were before that. But the point is that when there's an autonomously elected government, legitimate government, they have the power, they have the confidence and trust to make those strong decisions, like the ones that you did. But here, there are questions, right or wrong. I don't want to get into the intricacies of those questions, but there are questions that are being raised on how the elections were conducted, on how legitimate the government is. Would this government be able to deliver on those hard key measures in the short term, in the next 6 months?
I mean, obviously, there's a issue with the moral authority of this government. There's no gainsaying that there is not. It's there. We all know it. The government also knows that. But the government has no choice but to deliver. And in fact, I think that they are in such a big hole that the only thing they can do is to climb up and to do the hard things. It's not like they're very popular to begin with, right? So let's just do the hard things, take on the vested interest, and show the people of Pakistan that they can deliver. So if they did that, and I'm quite, of the view that, that there is no downside to them, if they did that, I think that they could take Pakistan out of the crisis, but that would require some very bold decisions. Let's see if they do, if they're able to do it.
If you were to advise them, what would those hard decisions be?
I mean, one reason why we have such horrible education, and education is basically non-existent in Pakistan, and is because of poverty in Pakistan. So, I mean, two, three things that I would like to do is I would like to see a very, very empowered constitutional local government. I would like to see some money going directly from the federation to the local governments and some to the provinces. I would like to see almost a doubling or two, of income transfers to the poorest people, from 420 billion to about 1,000 billion, to take it to 1% of GDP in maybe 2 years. And I would actually like to see the federal government and provincial government stop these what is called development projects, building roads, bridges, and small drainage and all that stuff. For now, 2, 3 years, we really don't need that. Give direct transfers to a lot of poor people, because there are so many people are suffering in poverty. Make private, either give vouchers to private schools, or, give parents more authority in local schools, put parents on school boards, give money directly to successful schools and to jurisdictions, and make education viable. This is not a solution that helps you right now, but it will help Pakistan in 20 years. And if nobody thinks that it doesn't help us right now, nobody ever does this, will never be, educated. And then, of course, population control. Look, no economic policy in Pakistan can work if Pakistanis remain unskilled and uneducated. So you need to educate, and you can't educate all these people. So we need to cut down on the number of babies being born. We can't have the third highest number of babies being born in the world. That's just not right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for, pointing that out. I think this is one of the key things which is completely missing from public discourse, from government discourse, and it has been for the longest of time. I believe it was in maybe late 90s or mid 90s when this still was being talked about, and there were this campaign towards population control. But since a lot of years, we've barely seen much being said about it. And I guess rather than being an asset, if you kind of merge the level of illiteracy in the country, this population outburst is more of becoming like a ticking time bomb and more of a liability than an asset. And there's no way then we can realize that population dividend. On that note, thank you so much. I think there were some very key considerations. And again, I'm very thankful for your time, for your advice, and for your guidance. And I believe and I hope that the government pays heed to it, and follow some of the things that you've mentioned. Thank you so much for your time, sir.